Hello and welcome to wakilsahab.com. Thank you so much for coming to the 15th lecture in the LFJ lecture series, where we are inviting lawyers, judges, activists, and professors to speak on some legal topic. So today is 13th September 2020. So we are fortunate enough to have a fantastic, leading academician of India. His name is Mr. Afroz Alam. He is a professor and he is the head of Department of Political Science at Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Hyderabad. I'd like to give a brief introduction of our honorable speaker. He is the director of Center for Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy, CSSEIP, Manu, Hyderabad. He is a PhD from Aligarh Muslim University. He has authored more than 30 research articles and 4 books. Uh, Basically, he has one upcoming book in the name of Muslims, Religion and Politics in North India. Is his forthcoming book with, I don't know how to spell it, Routledge, is it, sir? Am
Yeah,
I-
certainly.
First time I'm pronouncing it. Routledge and Democratic Deficit and minor political parties. Okay, this is also, is it Democratic Deficit? I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm,
democratic
I'm,
days.
I'm sorry, in the printing there's a mistake. Democratic Deficit and Minor Political Parties is his forthcoming book with Cambridge University Press. Amazing. He's editing the book Electoral Politics in Contemporary India to be published by Orient Black Swan. He is a columnist and uh, I'm sorry, he is a columnist and regularly writes opinion pieces in leading national newspapers. I'm really sorry. Newspapers like Deccan Herald, The Tribune, New Indian Express, Times of India, The Statesman, Asian Age, and so on. He has worked with Lok Niti, CSDS, New Delhi, and supervised many national election studies in UP. He is an emerging psephologist in India. He has received the Shah Waliullah Award 2009 jointly with Professor Faizan Mustafa, who is the present Vice Chancellor of Nalsar University, Hyderabad. Previously, our honorable speaker has served at Aligarh Muslim University, KIIT Law School, and National Law University, Odisha. He has been the registrar of NLUO, that is National Law University, Odisha, and director of public policy and governance, Cuttack. So I think this is a very brief write-up of decades of work, and we are truly thankful to Honorable Speaker Professor Afroz Alam sir to have generously agreed to come and speak to us. Today's topic, friends, is about the, how do you, sir has rephrased it in a very interesting manner about the nexus between law, political parties, and elections. So this is going to be a very interesting topic, as political parties are at the helm of affairs all the time. Politics, law, and elections all together create the, what do you say, magic formula of the power in our country and in many countries. And I think this is the kind of discussing about the backbone of power politics in democratic and other systems in India. We are really thankful, sir, for kindly agreeing to speak to us. Thank you so much.
So it's now my turn. Yeah, and let me first thank your Vakil Saab. It's very catchy word. In our normal life, we use it, Vakil Saab, because it's a vernacular style and ways to connect with people. Yeah, there are Vakil Saabs associated with this platform. So I felt nice because some of my friends used it quite long back, and since we are associated with the foundation of 4 law universities in India. Hmm.
Amazing.
So, being in the company of law and lawyers really gives you a different sort of experience, and I learned a lot with them. And all right, going with the idea that what to speak and what not to, because the first point is what not to speak when you are speaking on a topic. And when you ask me that look, because most of the students and the audience are from the legal background, I had many challenges to address at that, because digressions of online classes are very very high these days. uh, since you have already told that what am I going to speak, and uh, let me some draw some structures of this discussion. I'm saying that understanding the nexus between law, elections, and political parties. So, see that there is a catch here. I'm going to understand law in relation with elections and political parties and its practical dimensions, what is happening at the moment. But those practical understandings will come up when you have a background of something, a systemic understanding of what is electoral system per se, what is party system per se, and how it operates within the domain of law. So that's what my purpose was to address during this discussion. And when I mean to say that, first I'm going to discuss that the global framework, and the global framework for the electoral systems, that what do I actually mean by that electoral system, what kind of electoral systems world is following, and what kind of electoral systems India has adopted. Because there were lots of challenges before the Constituent Assembly, that what kind of political systems we are going to adopt. Are we going to inherit what were already in practice for the last 100 years? So lots of questions were there before the Constituent Assembly, that what kind of electoral systems should we adopt. So let me first go ahead with the some conceptual framework with it, and then I'll be aligning with the Indian context and some of the recent challenges vis-a-vis the law and the elections and political parties are concerned. So when I'm saying electoral system just is all about that, is to pick our that how are we going to pick our representatives. So how are we going to select, elect, or pick our representatives? Because we adopted a democratic system. So in a democracy, in a democracy where there are elections, how are we going to pick our representatives who are going to represent our interest in a body? So our concern was that, my concern is to understand the type of system we use to set the rules for how our politicians behave, or whether our government represent us, whether we can hold them to account if they let us down. So what is the mechanism? How are we going to elect our representatives? Are they going to represent us? Are they actually representing? Are they letting us down? What can be done? So those are the whole pinpoints of the electoral system. It's all about that methodology to elect somebody to represent you in a decision making body. This is what I actually mean for when I drafted. And the world, you know that we were the youngest democracy in 1947, and there were lots of electoral methods were already there, electoral systems across the world. I broadly classify those electoral systems into three types. One is the plurality electoral systems. Second one is the majority electoral systems. And the third one is the proportional electoral system. And plurality, majority, and proportional. Three major types of the electoral systems the world was having when we became independent. And what is that plurality? And India adopted that model. That is, you must have heard that plurality is all about the first past the post system, or you can say that winner takes the all. That whosoever win, they will be given all the chances. So, in a plurality electoral system is what we mainly use in India, in United States, in Canada, in South Africa, in Ireland, in New Zealand, in many African states as well. So we have adopted this model, and this is actually the Westminster model. Westminster model that is related with the Anglo-Saxon style of electoral system, what Britain used to have at that point of time. In that, it awards the seat to the candidate who receives the maximum number of votes. Means, if I'm having if there are 100 voters and there are lots of candidates and political parties contesting the elections, if I got the maximum number of votes, not the majority of the votes, so I will be declared as a winner. Second is the majority system of the electorates. This is also called the second ballot system. Second ballot system means it that who is going to be the winner. Winner will be the person who attains the majority of the votes, means 50% plus one vote. But what we see that if candidates are not able to attain 50% votes of the people, it simply means that nobody is declared winner. For that, another ballot, another elections will take place amongst the top contenders. Top three different principles are adopted by the different countries. So the first round of the, if nobody attains the winning margin of 50% plus one in the first round, then the second round of election will take place amongst the top contenders. And there are several formulas that are adopted by the world communities. Some are fixed, having some quota, some are having the percentage of votes, something like that. But idea is candidate must secure 50% plus one vote. Only then he will be declared as winner. And this is a model which we have seen second ballot system across the world. That's about elections in Australia, elections in Finland, and Portugal, Russia, and many European states have adopted this model. And this is what called the majority electoral system. The third model was available before us, before the Constituent Assembly, was the proportional electoral system. What does it mean? Because this is a very catchy framework that I want a proportional representation system. Everybody is demanding that I shall be represented in proportion to the size of my population. Political parties are saying that I shall be getting seats in proportion of the votes I secured in the elections. Two ways. So the proportional electoral system is all about, it's a most popular electoral system across the world. More popular than plurality system, more popular than majority system. So what is that? It takes the present, means that the political parties will get the number of seats in the parliament or the government in proportion of the uh, votes they have secured in the general elections. It means if I have secured 40% votes in the general elections, my seat will be 40%. Means the parties are getting elected. I mean that there are so many ways that to get the whole electoral process. It's not about that. There is one way of ensuring proportional representation of the political parties is by party list. One is the party list. And party list, what happens in the party list? In an elections, what happens that the candidates, the political parties are contesting the election. How many political parties are there? So in the electoral constituencies, a list will be provided. That who do you want? There are 10 parties contesting the elections. List of the parties are there, and they will be getting the votes. The people will be asked to vote for a political party, not the candidate. And here, that is in list system. There are two ways. One is a closed party list system. Second one is an open party system, a party list system. In one, only party list is being given to the voters that vote for a political party, and whatever share and percentage of votes a political party will receive, accordingly, the political parties appoint its own representative to the decision-making body. So the political parties People will vote for political parties. Political parties in turn will distribute the seats in proportion of the votes they have received. There are another, that is a open party list system. There is a choice for individuals that each political party will give you a list of the candidates. Earlier in open party, the closed party system, only parties' names are there. You have to vote for a party. In the second one is the voters will have a choice that which candidate will represent us in the decision making body. The discretion will not lie with the political parties. So that the people will be voting for the party one, people will also be voting for the candidates. In the closed system, your choice is not there, and that second choice, that the closed party system is open party system, is being followed by Denmark, Finland, Italy, Luxembourg, Switzerland, and there are lots of other political parties are there. But in the closed party system, we have seen that the legislative election of the Israel and the Germany happens on the closed party list, that only the voters need to elect only political parties. There is another way of getting the representation of the political parties and the candidates in the decision making bodies or in the parliament or in the ministry, that is called single transferable vote system. And this was a model. Another model was that we said that is fine. Can we adopt the single transferable vote? In that list, like party list system here, that
నాకు పార్టిసిపెంట్ లో నా నేమ్ వచ్చిందని చెప్పినా కదా.
am I audible?
తీసేసే వరకు.
Yes, sir. You're audible. Okay.
Any issues?
One person had opened the mic. Please continue, sir.
Okay. So there is another one is the single transferable vote. Another model of proportional system was before us was that let us adopt a model where the voters have to rank candidates, means by order of preference. For example, 5 candidates are contesting the elections. I have 5 votes, and where I have to show the preference that number 1 I prefer first, and if that person is not being elected, then the second preference of mine is the B. Then if that is not being elected, the third preference is C. So that voters have to show preference, and that is a degree of choice available in various formats across the world, and in many countries, for example in Ireland, Australia, and Malta, use this very format of single transferable vote for national election. Even in India, we have seen that for the election of the vice president, for the election of the president of India, we adopted that single transferable vote system. So the key features of that, the individuals will rank, there will be a ranking, top 10, top 5, that what is the ranking you are giving to the candidates according to the first, second, third, and the nth number of the choices. You have to express your preference, you have to give your ranking. If one person, and then finally, then after the one preferences are being calculated, then we have to see that who got the maximum number of first preference. And then we have said that if the one person got the maximum number of quota, then that person is going to be declared as a winner. So the idea is one should ensure the minimum quota, minimum number of the votes. Then you have to go with winning position. There is another model of the proportional system that is called mixed member model. Mixed member model, and that is called what happens that is one way is there are electoral systems across the world where you can see that the proportional system is also working. At the same time, plurality system is also working. Another one is that the two systems are there, that a candidate has to vote for a party, at the same time a candidate has to vote for the candidate. If a voter has to vote for the candidate. So this was the whole phenomena. That is, India, for example, we have adopted proportional system of representations. to elect the highest officers in India. For example, president, vice president, members of the uh, 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 upper house, Rajya Sabha and Vidhan Parishads, we elect those people by means of the proportional system that is called single transferable vote. When they are elected by an electoral college by means of a single transferable vote. So proportional system is there. But for the general elections, for Lok Sabha, for Vidhan Sabha, for the Panchayat and the local bodies, we adopted the model of plurality system, first past the post system of the voting. At the same time, we in India, it's the candidate oriented voting system is there. Means you have to elect the candidates, and at the same time, the political parties representations are being ensured in proportion of the number of candidates they have secured in the elections. So who will be forming the government is an idea of which party is going to form the government. So that is being the scene. This was the kind of electoral systems world we are having when we became independent, and those were the systems were also being there in the discussions of the Constituent Assembly. So the one is the broadly what kind of party systems were available before us. The global party system. We have already seen there. You know that there are a number of ways to understand the party politics. You can classify the numeric principle. How many political parties are contesting the elections? One, numeric principles. Second, principles to understand the party politics is the relevancy. How many relevant political parties are there in the electoral system? Second, third principle is how many effective number, that those who are able to secure or influence the voting behavior of the people. Effective number of the political parties are there. Similarly, that's the ideological lines. Whether that is a country uh, for political parties, a party system will be classified in accordance with the ideology, left, right, center. We have already seen the left parties, there are rightist parties, there are centrist parties. We have seen that in the United States of America, there are ideological divides, Republican parties and the Democratic parties. Similarly, that we have seen that the United Kingdom. So do we have the ideological kind? Third one was the social cleavage was there. Ethnicization of the political parties. The social cleavage is that whether my social caste, communities, reason, religion, race will be a criterion to look at the party system. At the moment, we as a consensus level, and so as to create the context, the world was seeing the three type of party system. One is the single party system. We have seen already those party system that in communist world where there are only one political parties recognized constitutionally, that only they will contest the elections. There are elections, only they have a multiple candidates and the people will vote for the candidates. But there is no choice available for the political parties. Similar that we have seen already in Iraq, Baath party was there, the single party contesting the elections. Similarly, there are two-party system. The world, it's a dominant system. The Western Europe and the American model is that they are the dominant party system. That the two-party dominant system is there. For example, in the United States, two parties are there. The power circulates amongst the two political parties. Similarly, that in United Kingdom as well, it's a two-party system. And there are political parties, there are countries where there are multi-party systems are there. So there are lots of political parties relevant and contesting the elections. In India, we are seeing these days that lots of political parties have emerged, but to what extent they are relevant? And for example, in many European countries are having the multi-parties taking claim for power and to come to power. So that was the whole system. So let us look at those two backgrounds, that the electoral systems and the party system the world was having. What was the whole challenges before us? So let us look at the Indian context and look at the entire discussion in India. You have already seen that the three kind of elections are happening in India. One is a national elections, second one is the state election, and the third one is the local bodies election. Three elections we have seen. And in that three elections, national elections, I mean the Lok Sabha elections, Rajya Sabha elections, vice president, president elections. So lots of that at the national level is happening. The state elections we have seen Vidhan Sabha, that's the legislative assembly, and then legislative council elections are taking place. And the third one is the local bodies elections. We have seen municipality elections, and we have seen panchayat elections. So the first two elections in India was supervised by the election commissions. And the third election, that the local level election, is being supervised by the state election commissions. That every state will have its own election commission to supervise, to monitor, to conduct the elections. So those were the things. For us, when we became independent, there were multiple challenges before us. And the first challenge before us was to organize the direct elections based on the universal franchise. And my dear friend, imagine a situation, a country which became independent never ever went with the idea of direct elections, never ever experienced the idea of universal adult suffrage. And we thought of that, giving every citizen of the country to vote in the electoral process. That was how to do that. That millions of the voters were there, and organizing the first elections with that is the whole means, and that election should be free, fair, and absolutely free from any no fear at all. So those were the challenges, that how to educate the political parties, how to educate the electorates, how to vote. So those were the whole challenges. Similarly, that there was a challenge that how to keep the independence of the electoral bodies intact. That was the whole challenge before the Constituent Assembly, and how to do that, how to create an independent election management body. Idea is, if you're not having an election management body, you cannot hold an election. Who will hold the elections? But the problem is that how to create an independent institution? What are the ways to ensure the independence, to ensure the transparency, to ensure the accountable elections, to ensure the participation of? So those were the things in a federal polity, because lots of the things, whether can we create an institution to conduct the elections that is permanent, or we should create an institution which is ad hoc. Once the election is over, then that body is also collapsed. So I guess lots of the things were there before the Constituent Assembly. Let me first tell you that it was decided, no great discussions happened in the election commissions, that what kind of electoral system should we adopt, because we were already convinced that we are going to go with the electoral systems already visualized by the Government of India Act 1935, which already organized an election. So we were we were not interested to experiment with new electoral system. So we adopted the Anglo-Saxon model, a Westminster model of the parliamentary system of the governance, where the electoral districts are there, where the people will be voting in the election. But we did adopt many other things, like for example, earlier that before the independence, we had the lots of qualifications for the voting. Who can vote in the elections? Not everybody. Not more than 10% people of the country were having the voting rights. Imagine a situation, because lots of caveats, lots of qualifications were added. There were who can vote in the elections. Those who were paying income tax, those who were having some education, those who were having some land holdings, those who were in governments. So there were limited franchise. You cannot vote in the elections if you are not paying the taxes. You cannot vote in the election if you are not having the land holdings. You cannot own the elections if you are not educated, if you do not belong. So the kind of the first experiment said, no, we are not going to experiment with any added qualification. Let the voting rights be universal. Whosoever is adult, and by that time 21 years age was sort of a mature age to decide for the elector to vote in the elections. So we thought of that. Second model was separate electorates. That can we have a system? We have already discussed that the Muslims will vote for the Muslims, the Dalits will vote for the Dalits. So it's all about that separate electorates, that there will be a constituencies. We sort of know. We thought when we become independent, we said, no, we are not going to go ahead with the idea of separate electorates. We are going to have a uniform, universal electorate system. Second one is, there was a qualification for functional representation. Idea is we adopted that no, nobody is going to have maximum number of votes. One man, one vote. Everybody will have one vote. And that was the model we adopted. That is called first past the post system model. That is called plurality voting system, where number is more important. That every individual, every adult citizen will have one vote, and the parties or the candidate who secures the maximum number of votes will be declared as a winner in the constituency. We adopted this model. Then while thinking of this, we created that let there be a constitution. So we drafted the entire chapter 15, part 15 of the Indian Constitution, devoting to the elections. So Indian constitutions devoted a full part to it, starting from Article 324 to 329, dealing with the election management body, dealing with the rights of vote, dealing with how to conduct the elections, what are the responsibilities. But you know that everything cannot be discussed in the constitution. We thought of now we should have we should have that election commission. Election commission that will be a permanent body. Article 324 you have to start with. It was given the task of organizing the entire elections, starting from president to the Vidhan Parishad, legislative council and assembly. And, so that was the responsibility given to the election commission, and we thought of the let's have an election commission which is independent of the executive interference, and for that we ensure that how to appoint the election commissioners, what shall be the criteria for the removal of them, so that they shall not be influenced by the party in power. So the whole point, let there be an election commission, and those election commissions will deal with the whole office. Excuse me. Let me switch off. So election commission was thought of that it must be empowered body. It was given the responsibility of conducting the elections in free and fair manner. It was given the responsibility of polling, repolling, and the model going with the model code of conducts. It's going with the dealing with all the disputes arising out of the elections. So everything. It's a question judicial, and that was we have decided for. Then we thought of that. Fine, we have finally agreed what kind of electoral system we are going to have. We are going to have an election commission who is empowered to do everything in relation with the elections, starting from the nominations to preparing the electoral rolls to conducting the elections for recognizing the political parties, then ensuring that. So whole process began with the independent body called Election Commission. Now that we have to look at, we adopted the plurality system I just discussed. The next point is let us look at the political parties in India. In India, that's if I look at the political parties, we have already seen that how political parties are defined, and in India we have seen that there are ideological lines, there are social cleavages, and then there are political systemic model for defining the political parties. Let me tell you that some other things. And what is that surprise? That there is no provision in the Indian Constitution that define the meaning, functions, type, and obligations of the political parties in Indian democracy. And only in that is in 1985, when we added the 10th schedule dealing with the anti defections that we have come out with certain provisions that added directly relevant to how a political parties have to work. So the first reference of the parties were discussed in relation with anti-defection laws, which is scheduled in our constitution as part of the 52nd Amendment Act. So there are certain provisions which deals with the qualifications and disqualifications of the members of the parliament and legislative frameworks, and on some grounds of the defections, but no clear definitions have emerged out. Imagine a situation that if I am interested in forming that the kind of the political parties we want to. So the first point is, in India, there is one act, and you must have seen that Representation of People's Act. There are lots of other laws are defined. That one is the Representation of the People Act 1950. Then there is another act called the Representation of the People Act 1951. Then there are a lot of finance acts are involved which deals with the elections. Then there are Parliament Prevention of Disqualification Act 1958. Then there are Registration of the Electoral Rules 1960. Then the Conduct of the Election Rules are there. Then there are laws related with the expenses. There are certain judicial pronouncements dealing with that. Let us look at the kind of the political parties we are having, technically speaking. So the election symbol Reservation and Allotment Order 1968, which came out to provide for specification, reservation, choices, and allotment of symbols at elections in the parliamentary and assembly constituencies. And that has given the order that what is the whole political parties. In that act, the rule section 6 clause 1 of this order defines that what is political party, and they define that the political parties are either recognized political parties or unrecognized political parties. So that hello.
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
So the idea of that order 1968, the election symbol order 1968 came out with that. What is they imagined that the political parties are either recognized or unrecognized political parties. The two imaginations are there in that act, and since we opted for the plurality electoral systems, and can you imagine that in our system in India, we opted for that let there be a 3 model for the elections. One is the national party system, The second one is the state party system, and the third is registered parties only. So we thought of the imaginations before that law was that political parties are either recognized or unrecognized. Then who are recognized parties? Recognized parties are two types. One is a national party and the second one is the state party. The third one is in the third category, unrecognized political parties. That unrecognized political parties are registered with the Election Commission of India, but they are not able to get recognized as a state or national party. So in that para that we have just system, we thought of that. What is a political party? Then we that act is defining that a political party means an association or body of individual citizens of India registered with the commissions as a political party under section 29A of the Representation of the People Act 1951. So these are the criteria. But to be a national political party, what is to be done? If I want to form a political party, let us discuss that. Can I form the political party? Can you form the political party? So these days, formation of political parties are very, very easy. And you have seen that the 1990s witnessed the explosion of the political parties in India. And at the moment, imagine a situation, there are around 2,600 political parties. 2,600 political parties. And we never thought of that. In our daily parlance or discussions, we recognize only few political. We cannot name more than that is 50 political parties. So imagine a situation in an electoral system, how there are around 2,600 political parties are participating. How competitive would be that electoral system? How competitive? But there are some catches here. When I'll be discussing some practical aspects, we will be looking at those aspects. The point is, can I form the political party? Can you form the political party? I said yes, anybody can form the political party. And now it has now become the habit of the people to form the political parties, and that is why the number is increasing day by day. And every state election or the local election or the national elections, you suddenly see a greater rise of in the new political parties formations. So I have to simply go and download the form. We just simply write an application that we are interested to form a political party, decide a bylaws or the constitution of the political parties, get the 100 people as a party members who are not the members of any other political parties. Their names are to be listed in the electoral list, those 100 people. Then you have a 10,000 rupees, deposit that, and you just simply give an oath and allegiance that you are not going to disturb the India's sovereignty, unity and integrity. You will abide by our own constitution. You are ready with the own political party. So any day, if you have 10,000 rupees, if you are having the support of 100 people who are the party members registered in the electoral list, not the member of any other political party, if you have a bylaws or constitution of a political party, you can form the political party. So that is the, but the idea is, once you registered a political party, Election Commission is having no provisions how to deregister them. Deregister. That is why the number of political parties are increasing. Many political parties are now obsolete. Can you imagine that the 260, 70% of the political parties do not contest the elections. And those who contest the elections, in that there are around 64% political parties who remain confined to the 1 seat to the 4 seats. There are very few political parties who contest the elections, who take part in the campaign, those who are sincerely. But what is happening? Here there is a catch. There are laws in dealing with that. Why am I interested to form a political parties? One, I have certain agenda, I have certain vision for it, for the country to offer. I am interested to give a competitions to the rival political parties whose ideas do not match mine ideas or our ideas, and therefore we are into the competitive race. Let the electorates decide. Or we are interested in giving more choices to the electorates and therefore increasing the democratization in the country, that people are having more and more number of choices in terms of political parties. Or there are some catch here. Am I using the formation of the political parties merely as a, as a business entity? If I have money, because under the section 13A of the Income Tax Act, a political party is exempted. A political party is exempted from paying income tax. So anyone who is donating to the political parties, they are exempted from paying income tax on that. So some exemptions are there in terms of income tax. So those donors will enjoy the income tax benefit. The all the expenditures of the political parties are exempted. The only point Election Commission says that you maintain your account, you do an audit, and if you are having the entire account, if there are donors above who are paying 20,000 rupees, you maintain the records. Below 20,000, unaccountable, anonymity is being maintained throughout. And therefore, I do not contest the election. I am more interested in formation of the government. I am submitting as a contribution report. I am submitting my returns to the income tax that I have an expenditure of around crores of rupees. So immediately that the political parties have become the conversion machine from black money to white money. You can control that, is easily controlled, because you have to simply send that the Election Commission is not going to ask you that from where did you get the money. You simply maintain the records and submit the and if you have multiples of below 20,000 contribution, that is unaccountable. So the idea is you're using that. You first, non-participation in the electoral politics. You are not increasing the democratizations. You are not. So idea is there is a deficit at the multiple levels in terms of the economy, in terms of the competitiveness of the polity. So those were the things. But anybody can form the political parties. Who is going to monitor? And the Election Commission is constantly saying that fine, you submit the reports and contribution reports and audit reports, but you are not submitting. Still, you are continuing as a political party. That is one catch in India is there. But first look at that. What kind of political parties? So all political parties have to register with the Election Commission, and therefore they are registered political parties. And those who do not get the status of the national or state parties will remain as registered unrecognized political party. Second is there is national political party. Who are those national parties? There are only three conditions. If a political party secures 6% of the valid votes in an assembly or Lok Sabha general elections in any 4 or more states and won at least 4 seats in Lok Sabha general election from any state or the states, that party will be declared as a national party. So the idea is 6% of the valid votes in Lok Sabha or any assembly elections in any 4 states, 6:4, and 1/4 Lok Sabha seats from any states. So the idea is 6-4-4. If you are having that, you will be declared as a national party. Similarly, that is second criteria. If you are not able to fulfill that, second criteria is if you are able to secure 2% of the total Lok Sabha seats in the Lok Sabha general election, then these seats have to be won from at least 3 states. Means if you have 2% of the Lok Sabha seats from 3 states, you will be declared as a national party. Third criteria is if you are declared as a state party in 4 states, you will be declared as a national party. So at the moment there are 8 national party, and recently in 2019, National People's Party of Sangama, Kunad Sangama, who got split from NCP. It was is declared as a national party. So now there are 8 political parties who are listed as a national political party. There are state political parties are there. The state parties are having 5 conditions. Who are to be declared as a state party? So idea is, if you are able to secure 6% of the valid vote and win at least 2 seats in the assembly constituency, is 6% of the valid votes and 2 seats in the assembly, you will be declared as a state party. One condition. The second condition is, if you are able to ensure 6% of the valid votes and only 1 Lok Sabha seats, if not 2 assembly seats, 1 Lok Sabha seats, you will be declared as a state party. If you are not able to do that, the third criteria is, if you are able to ensure 3% of the seats in at least 3 seats in the assembly elections. So it is at least 3% of the seats are 3% in whichever that assembly election. 3% votes in the assembly elections, you will be declared as a state party. Fourth criteria is, if you are able to win 1 seats on every 25 seats from a state in Lok Sabha general elections, you will be declared as a state party. Or forget about that, if you are able to secure at least 8% of the valid vote in an assembly or Lok Sabha general elections, you are declared as a state party. So the idea is, those recognized party. And what is the benefit of being recognized? So the laws are given in the Representation of the People Act is saying that you will have reserved symbols, you will get the 2 free copies of the electoral rolls, you will be consulted by the Election Commission in holding the elections, you will be given free time on the national channels to say about. So lots of benefits are there to be recognized as a political party in India. So the idea is, this is the 2 model. That one we have discussed, the electoral systems in India and the party system. That I focus mainly on that, the elections, the national the legal ways of dealing with the national state or registered unrecognized political parties. Let's come out with certain practical aspects of the Indian party systems. The idea is, we have already seen from 1952 first elections to 2019, we have witnessed that 17 elections, 17 general elections, and 3 ways of looking at the party politics. The first one was that India experienced the one dominant party system where the Congress ruled in India till that is first 4 general elections without any break. Whether it is the national elections, whether it is the state elections, Congress gained the majority. That is from 1952 to 1967 was a period when Congress was the only party, and that is why it is called hegemonic system. Or if I will be recalling the best, Rajni Kothari was one of the greater political scientists that India has produced. He said that Indian political system will be termed as a Congress system. So that is the system that nobody was in a position to topple the Congress from the seat of the power. First time the Congress system was disturbed was in 1967 elections, and that 1967 elections, what happened that out of the 16 assembly seats, assembly elections, in 8 assembly elections, Congress was out of power, voted out of power. First time in 1967 election, there was some opposition unity. So the idea is, there was some minor that break, and that was the time India has witnessed the bipolarization of the state party system. Center will have one dominant party system till 1989. States politics become more competitive, where lots of regional parties have emerged to the scene, started giving competition to the Congress. So there was a bipolarization of the political party at the state level, but at the central level, it was a Congress system alone, and it continued till 1989. And giving a challenge to the Congress was a very, very tough call. And similarly, and from 1989 to 2009, there was a fragmentation of the parties in India. Lots of political parties have emerged to the scene. Caste-based parties have emerged. Region-based parties have emerged to the scene. Lots of many other political parties have come to the forefront. So ideas we have, so the social cleavages become very, very prominent. What was more important to notice is that from 1989 to 2009, during this 7 elections happened, the Indian political system was very fragile, very volatile, and there was a collision in politics in India. And if one government collapsed in 1 year, another government collapsed in 13 days. So frequency of the elections have increased. And can you imagine 1989 elections, no political parties have attained majority. In that 7 elections, no political parties getting the absolute majority to form the government. So they were hugely dependent upon the coalition partners. So it was a phase of regionalization. It was a phase of the coalition politics. It was a phase of the social cleavages, identity-based politics. And therefore, we have seen that. And we have seen constant decline of the Congress from 89 to till 2004. And 2004 and 2009 was an aberration in Indian politics. But still, despite Congress coming to the power, they did not form they did not get the absolute majority to form the government on their own. They were usually dependent on the coalition partners. So the idea is that was the kind of elect. But there is another system coming up that is called saffron political system. From 2014 onwards, a new system have emerged where the political parties, which was constantly struggling for 10% of the votes, suddenly got the approval of the people to vote for the to run the country. And 2014 was the first experiment where a political parties got around 31% votes, and then 30 that got the party increased further. That's the vote share in 2019, and we are seeing a new political system is emerging in the country, replacing the Congress system to a saffron political system where a new ways of dealing with things happen. So these were the things. Problem with certain where the laws pitch in. We have all the laws, we have all the regulations, and we have already detailed what are the laws, how to conduct the elections, how to monitor the elections, how to enroll a political parties, what ought to be the limitations on the candidate, on the political party, on the campaign, on the meetings. Everything is there. Are we able to deal with that? Imagine a situation. There are laws that deals with the criminalization of the politics, and laws dealing with that, thanks to the Lily Thomas judgment by the Supreme Court, which says that any person who is convicted by a competent court for 2 years will be immediately debarred as a member of the Legislative Assembly or the member of the Parliament. That how to curb that, and that is what we have seen, that the Laluji was disqualified on the ground when voter schemes came up and he was convicted. So lots of the convictions are there. Similarly, that the law happened, but did it stop the criminalization? In 2004, we were having the 24% of our representatives as criminal, and then 2009 we have seen that increased to 30%. Then 2014 we have seen 34%, and now in 2019 we are having 43% of our representatives in the Parliament having criminal cases pending against them. Then again the matter was referred to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court was that why not to bar a candidate to contest the elections or disqualify them if there are heinous criminal charges against them. Recently, in 2020, that was the case, and Supreme Court said no, it's a domain of the Parliament to legislate on the qualification and disqualifications of a person who wants to contest an elections. Fine. So idea is, but Parliament, who was ready to come out with a law not to disqualify a person who is convicted for 2 years, could not be expected to commit suicide voluntarily. So they did not, because the UP was interested to come out with an ordinance before further scheme judgment not to disqualify the Lalu Prasad Yadav. Similarly, that the present regime as well. But now the again Supreme Court, a judgment which came up in February 2020 and which is a very, very landmark, but saying that a political party has to declare on its website or on the local media channels that why they have given a person having criminal cases pending against them a ticket. Winnability will not be accepted as a reason. The same judgment, it's a wonderful judgment by the Supreme Court, but whether that it is going to impact the criminalization or not, I am not able to comment at the moment, because the first election we are going to face is Bihar elections, where this will be executed, where every political party has to say that why they have given a person having criminal antecedent as a candidate, as a party ticket. So that was the recent judgment. Similarly, that there are lots of other things. The criminalization part, despite having the laws, we are not able to stop the whole criminalization of the politics. The second problem is that we are not able to see the educational background of our representatives. Can you imagine that the proportion of the people from the 5th and 12th pass is 48%. So in 2019 election, if I will take that, we are not able to get the representatives. Do we need, that is that only 7% of candidates who contested the elections were graduate and above, and it's quite alarming that we are not able to attract the fair, talented, educated people to contest the elections. Do we need the law? An attempt was being made for local bodies election in Rajasthan, where is saying that for anyone who is to contest the local bodies election must have necessary educational qualifications. So there were attempts. Is it a fair ways to restrict? Does education replace the experiences? Similarly, that is the one way of that, how to deal with the growing indifference of the people for contesting the elections. Those were the situations. For that, many attempts were being made, and many private member bills were being introduced in the parliament to make minimum of the educational qualifications as a reason for giving the candidates. Similarly, that there is another way of looking at things. The idea is financial backgrounds, that an ordinary, whether our system is giving fair chances to each and every one to contest an elections. The idea is, the whole point is useless, because we are not able to attract the good people. Here is, if I am not a billionaire, if I am not a millionaire, if I am not having the rich economic backgrounds, I cannot contest the election, because winnability is very, very high. A person having less than 1 crore as an asset, less than as 1 crore, my probability of winning the election is less than 1%. Imagine, even if 1 crore. So the idea is now that we are going ahead with more and more business communities and the people who are having rich assets participating in the elections. Now that it's no more an ordinary game. So we can say that the in TN session versus Union of India, it was already declared that the free and fair elections and free from and fearless elections is an essential feature of the Indian democracy. Are in fact it's a part of the basic structure. How can a system be free and fair when it does not provide a fair probabilities of contesting the elections? Because an electoral expenditure is, I cannot, there are limitations by the election commissions, but the election commission is not able to monitor the electoral expenditure. Because in an election, a candidate has to spend around 50 crore minimum to win a parliamentary elections. 50 crores. So if you are that, if there are whole glamorizations and if the entire campaign, there are certain caps by the election commission, how what amount a candidate can expend, but that is the calculation. There are many ways to dodge those laws. So in fact, the whole cap by the election commissions coming up with certain rules having minimum expenditure is not working well on the ground. Neither that is election commission is able to monitor. So the idea is there is the huge growth of the rich people. So the percentage of crorepati candidates in the Lok Sabha elections have increased. For example, that is in 2009 elections, there were only 16% of the crorepati candidates. But in 2014, 27% of the candidates were crorepatis. And in 2019 elections, 29% of the candidates were crorepatis. The idea is fine that if 29% candidates are crorepatis, what an ordinary citizens belonging to an ordinary asset income background can have that. Imagine a situation that we are not able to monitor that are giving a private system. We are promoting that the crorepatis will have a fair chance to win an elections. Similarly, that's in 2019 there were 9 criminalization. How do we map that? Despite having the 2004 was a landmark period when the election watch and ADR form put a limitations, and the Supreme Court came out with a judgment saying that a candidate has to disclose his educational background, his all assets and liabilities, his all pending criminal cases, whether the convictions or the pending criminal cases. Despite that, despite all the informations, be it criminal background, be it the educational background, be it the economic assets and liabilities of the candidate and his spouses and the family members available in an affidavit, we are not able to look at that. Let's see the example. One election, 2019 latest, that 19% of the candidates were with criminal cases, and the 13% candidates were with serious criminal cases. And average assets of each candidate, if I take make an average candidate, that is every candidate who participated, and there were 1,500 candidates in that who participated, having 4.14 crore, and that is the ADR data, most trusted data. That average asset of each candidate was 4 crore. Imagine a situation, a professor like me who earns a basic minimum cannot think of contesting the election, and therefore there is a growing indifference. So this is the whole point that I wanted to say, that we are not able to monitor that the election, and there are certain flaws in the electoral laws. Imagine a situation in from that is in just 1998, that in earlier elections we used to spend 100 crores, 100 crores. The entire elections has been incurred. 2019 elections, a calculation was being made by Center for Media Studies. We spent around 60,000 crore. So we were 60,000 crore we spent on the on just one elections, and and these are the estimates only for the campaign expenses that was incurred during the period between the announcement of the election schedule and the Asia and the declaration of the election results. So the 60,000 rupees in a presidential election of the United States, we are not able to spend that much. So the idea is 3 billion amount is already there, and that increased to what kind of expenditure? 3 to 6 billion in 2014, 3, and then it gets doubled in 2014. So those who are country, every 4 crore, you cannot, if you are a crorepati only, then you can contest the election. We have already seen that what is the winning possibility. Winnability is the factor why the political parties are giving them the tickets. We have already seen that there are lots of laws and by the Supreme Court, but this Election Commission of India is not able to monitor that the cash in the form of the bribe and liquor, drugs, narcotics, precious metals, freebies. If you will be looking at those things, we are not absolutely able to give a fair system. If you'll go and ask the people, tend to many people will admit that they got certain benefits from the candidate and therefore they voted. So voting preferences are being impacted, but the Election Commission is not able to give us credible system to monitor the expenditure. So the whole seizure, and for that we were able to seize around 4,000, in fact 3,500 crore just seized the money. So when we are able to, in the police raids or in the inspections, we are able to seize around 4,000 crore rupees, and we are spending, rough calculation is 60,000, 6 billion. Imagine what kind of expensive things we are happening. Similarly, that we are not able to give a credible, the laws are not credible enough in India to deal with certain sort of mechanisms which directly influences the voting preferences of the people. And by law, you cannot do it. Once the model code of conduct is implemented, you cannot influence, you cannot announce the policy decisions, you cannot come out on advertisements, you cannot come out. But there are surrogate advertisements, there are pet news, there are lots of social media campaigns, and we have already seen that Cambridge Analytica was able to use your social media data and Facebook data and analyze this and impact the elections. There are already complaints. Facebook recently and lots of social media houses are facing that they are able to they prefer the particular political parties in terms of content. They did not, despite their internal regulations and terms and conditions, they continued with those things. So the social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they are able to influence the voting choices. Even the model code of conducts are there, but we are not having effective laws to deal with all those things. And there are lots of are to be discussed. Similarly, that the lots has to be said about Election Commission, and we have already seen that how Election Commission's integrity was compromised. And you must remember that what are the politics working in the in the Election Commissions. You must read J.M. Lingdo's book, The Chronicle of Impossible Elections, or the S.Y. Qureshi's book, An Undocumented Wonder. You will have a detailed account that what is happening in the election commissions. So the idea is lots of Supreme Court cases were there which declared that you cannot have a whether the Election Commission of India is free, independent, transparent is a matter of debate. Idea is appointment of the election commissioners are by are just like in a very fair manner, but there are lots of ways those commissioners are dependent upon the regime central governments to go ahead. Second is the removal, for example, that the chief election commissioner could be removed by the way President, Chief Justice of India is being removed, that impeachment process. But for other two commissioners, the same system is not being adopted. Means that the other two commissioners will always be dependent upon the will of the executives. The executives' interference is very high. Similarly, that the the idea of collegium had to be discussed. That whether the appointment, for example, the composition of the election commission can be changed at the will of the executive. The parliament is empowered to change the commission. At one point of time, there was only one chief election commissioner. When TN session was there and started tightening the whole world, then the number of the election commissioner increased. Finally, thankfully, that the number and size of the composition is fixed at 3. But it can be changed at the will of the parliament. So that composition of the election commission can be changed at the moment. Similarly, that the post-retirement appointments is also affecting the working of the election commission. And that has given, for example, that if there are lots of ways when we can see, and lots of examples are there where the model code of conducts are being compromised, where the dissent notes of the election commissioners were not given the values, where the VVPAT issues are already there, creating an issues, the election dates, the having, so lots of media debates are there, that the integrity of the election commission is being compromised and lots of violations are being made. Some moral crisis have been generated by the working of the election commission. So that is also creating another way of looking at things. Similarly, that there is a growing indifference of the political parties and voters. The people are not really getting interested in terms of voting. The idea is, if I am not able to take part enthusiastically in the electoral process or the political processes, it means we are not creating any value in the idea of vote. And you know that vote is a power. It's a power to decide your political destiny. And if you're not voting, so one thought of that, if the participation of the people is very high, and you see that lots of candidates, we have adopted the system of first past the post system. And in first past the post system, who ensures the maximum number of votes will be declared as a winner. Did I take the lots of time?
No, sir. How much more of your this thing is remaining?
So the idea is, I'll be concluding in 5 minutes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So idea is that first past the post system is creating a crisis of legitimacy of the people who are in power. The political parties which secures the 31% is ruling. The a candidate which secures 12% votes was declared as a winner. Means in the electoral in constituencies, if there are more, on an average number of candidates are 10, average number of political parties are 6, 7, then if the 1000 votes are there, imagine a situation that first is the voter turnout is very less, and those who are voting, their votes are divided in 10 10 candidates. The candidate who secures the 20% votes will be declared as a winner, because remaining 80% votes are divided among the 10 candidates. It's very difficult situations. So that is the legitimacy crisis. So then we thought of that, can we have the compulsory voting system? India adopted this model. Lots of private member bills were being introduced on the parliament to make voting compulsory, but there are lots of issues involved. Gujarat tried to experiment it at the local bodies election, that the election voting is compulsory until there are reasonable grounds not to vote. So the idea is, can we think of that? The We are not able to ensure the generate interest. So there are laws to cope. Recently, we have seen that the electoral bonds. So the criteria of anonymity, that if you are the you can receive the votes. Now that the income of the political parties have increased manifold because of the clause of anonymity, that you need not to declare your names. You did not declare your company, that who has given you the unaccountable, unverifiable donors. The size of unverifiable donors is around more than 60% of the total income of the political parties annually. So this is creating a crisis. How to ensure that the political party has to run? Similarly, political parties are not, despite performing the public and political task, is kept out of the information act, that they are not subject to the right to information act. They need not, so they are not, internal process are not transparent, neither they are funding. They are increasing manifold. And in one of these statements I can say that on an average the income of the individuals annually increasing is not more than 7%. But if you will look at the income of the political parties growth annually, it's more than 100% increase. And if you look at the net worth of the politicians, there are 1,000%. If you are a politician today and having 1,000, you will have just multiplied with 1,000. So 1,000% growth rate of a politician. So my request to you all is that join politics and have a wonderful vocation and vocation and the opportunity to grow more and more economically, not only as other things. Thank you so much. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for that excellent, enlightening, and I would say enchanting, what do you say, lecture, sir. The discourse was really dialectical. It is prompting a lot of questions in us that we have to think about that. I love the way you have been coming from pre-independence, independence, and the need for making such laws for the foundational rudimentary thing, what system should we adopt and how we are going to do things, and subsequently a lot of things in the context of a timeline have been explained, and you have seen what do you say, the recent elections, how coalition governments have happened and things like that. It is really amazing. I think uh, this is also one creative aspect when you are integrating all the elements together to give a very good abstract picture in just, I think, 80-90 minutes is a this is also a great skill, I would say. And what I'll do is now, because you're talking about politicians and the corruptions, I will now exercise my moderator's privilege, and I'll try to ask the first question. Sir, what happens is, like, yes, with the voting and other things, we see that certain number of people are voting. Simply speaking, let's say a political party is getting 30% of the votes polled throughout the country, and it is said to be in majority according to the list of parties getting polled, so, or the polls being given to the party. Conclusively, the point is, because it is number one in terms of overall percentage, in comparison to other parties, but in one context we can say that about 70% of the voters have not voted for that party. So is there any dilemma there? Can you please tell, sir?
See that it is that is the disadvantage of going with the idea of first past the post system. In first past the post system, the winnability is decided by the maximum number of votes polled by the candidate in an election. All right. If we are not able to control the number of the candidates in the elections, there are candidates from 3,000 political. I told you that there are 2,600 political parties, and after that there are independent candidates. So average number of candidates contesting the election is around 10 all over India. So the idea is, if we say that effective number of candidates, if you will say that, imagine, eliminate the last 6, an effective number of candidates are 4. So in the last 6, if you have eliminated, they have consumed your around 20% votes. 20% vote means now that 80% is there. 80% is this is what the legitimacy crisis. So idea is a candidate, and there are many instances when a candidate secured 12% vote was declared as an MP.
Amazing.
So there are lots of cases around that. Lots of the issues are there. So what is the way forward? That is the whole point. Shall we? I told you other. Can we go with the second ballot system, majority system? That in the first round of election, if no candidate secured the majority of votes, can we go with the second option? Is that repolling among the top 4 contenders, those who got more than 12% votes or 15% votes, amongst them there will be an election, and those who secures the maximum 50% votes will be declared as. The one way of dealing with this crisis is second ballot system. Second one is coming out with certain regulations to deal with the frivolous candidates. If there is in one election, if one Mahbub Saab is contesting, you will see in number of Mahbub Saab contesting the election. So how can we judge that? We need to work out. There is a need to create a political cultures where we are to be informed, where we have to be vigilant. If we are not as a conscious citizenry, then no election machinery can hold the transparent elections.
Thank you so much. I try to make simple examples, like you said about the 2-stage process. I would compare it with the IIT exam, where first you have this prelims and then you have this advance, where first filtered candidates are taken. Let me go to the chat box. Number 1 is okay. Mr. Sanjay Gadalia is appreciating this thing about. The point which said, Mr. Sanjay Gadalia is asking, what is the role of ADR? We need an audit report on the election commission's performance and failures. It's
Yeah,
common.
absolutely. There are performances. There are audits of the election commissions, but those audits are by independent researchers, agencies, and think tanks. They are regularly doing it. Whether the democratic regimes are ready to accept those suggestions, there are lots of recommendations by the law commissions. There are lots of suggestions by the think tanks like ADR, Association for Democratic Reforms. There are lots of suggestions coming from the CSDS, but whether that inputs are received in the right directions or not, it's dependent upon the will of the government, whether they're interested or not. For example, at the moment, is lots of elections. Idea is there were times till 67, all elections were happening at the same time. So, and those elections now, and multiple elections, every India is in 24 into 7 election mode. One election is gone, another election is due, and therefore lots of sensationalism is taking place in India. Because in India you cannot win an elections while going with your policies and programs and manifestos and the past performances. Indian elections are irrational, and Indian voting pattern are irrational too, and therefore expecting them to behave is very, very difficult. And therefore elections, the way the kind of languages are being used in the electoral campaigns, the idea is it has been monitored, that you will find the reports how many hate speeches happened during the elections. You will find the reports that what are the violations made by the election commission during the elections, model code of conducts. See, for the idea is there are audits, there are reports. The idea is why are we voting the fact, despite knowing the fact that the candidate is not good enough, the party is not good enough, they did not deliver good in the past, and there. But our system, our voters are subject to collective amnesia. They forget and they just forgive and vote the same person again and again. So the idea is, so you must have, for an electoral system, it's not only government, it should be an accountable citizenry as well. We
Thank
as a
you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Ibad is asking if won't the process of deregistration of a political party, if initiated, affect the freedom of speech and expression along with very fundamentals of democracy, which are for the people, by the people, and of the people?
see fundamental, see that there are laws. Idea is to ensure the right freedom of speech and expression. You have to give conditions. You have to create conditions so that a person should be able to effectively express it. Right to freedom of speech and expression is not to misuse it, but to use it. Imagine a situation, if you, while using your freedom of speech and expressions, lots of conditions are attached to it. If you are involved into forgery, if you are involved into corruptions, if you are involved in making converting black money into white, if you are involved into electoral malpractices, can we allow them in the name? Because you allow them in the name of freedom of speech and expression. So freedom of speech and expression should be operated in a healthy democratic environment. So we should create that healthy environment by putting limitations on unhealthy elements. And to adopt that, there is lots of, there discussions are to be needed. There discussions are to be needed. There are methodologies are to be devised. We cannot go and make a law. Let there be a law be made through consultative process.
Amazing. Mr. Sanjay Gadalia is saying that he did not know that political parties do not pay tax, and he is thanking you, sir. Next is he's saying very informative
Well,
session.
he just asked him that to read section 13 A of the Indian Income Tax Act. They exempted.
Okay. Okay. Next, Konda Konero is saying very informative and excellent session, sir. Thank you. Miss Nikhat R.I. saying excellent. Zishan Hashmi is saying very nice, sir. Again, Sanjay Gadalia, sir, is asking how do we hold the election commission accountable as simple system of trust is no longer working? What are the suggestions? Also, every politician and person entering the parliament has to compulsorily pass an exam like JEE or board exam to establish knowledge of the ministry, constitution, and working of the government in each ministry. Can we put in a system like that?
Yeah, see that holding an examinations. Can you say that if it's one way of looking at it. Idea is we need an electoral agency which is independent, which is transparent, which is accountable. And how to do that? That's the question. The question is, who are the election commissioners? Election commissions are in whose hands? We should devise laws, rules, regulations which completely come out saying that there shall be least executive interference in the functioning of the election commissions. One. Second is that there shall be independent appointment and removal process. They shall be appointed through a collegium system, and that collegium should consist of the people. There shall be a representation from the government, from the opposition, from the Supreme Court, from the civil society. Let there be a collegium to appoint that. Let there be, once you are appointed, you cannot be removed at the will of the central government. You cannot. So let there be pure autonomy, pure things available. The idea is you are a human. You are not creating an heavenly institutions where farishtas are there to execute the laws. We are human. And if we are human, we are subject to emotions because we run by instincts. And ideologically, we get convinced at the personal level. It affects our professional life as well. But it's very, very important to bring professionalism in the functioning of the public institutions, which should be working in accordance with the firm principles. So, appointment, removal, the laws and regulations, least executive interference, post-retirement job, they should be barred from the future appointments. So that not only that, they should be given handsome salaries and perks so that they should not be get lured by any other means. They shall become you. So like that, we can think of let there be a consultative process. Board exams, it's not about that. Those who are corrupt are educated. I'm telling you.
Okay, sir. Let me go to the next one. Mudassir Bashir Bhatt is asking, saying it was pleasure to hear you, sir. My question is that India has a parliamentary system where there is close relation between legislature and executive. The party in power always tries to amend and pass laws that would suit their interests. So law is subjected to interests of party in power. Should we go for the principle of separation of power like USA that would make judiciary more powerful? In this, can we maintain the supremacy of law and avoid malpractices?
See that the it's not about devise any system. Do you think that America is a perfect, honest, efficient system? People in America are thinking of transforming presidential elections to a parliamentary system. And where there is a parliamentary system, they say that now let us go with the idea of the separation of power. But the idea is it's not about that bringing laws of changing this. It's all about that whatever laws are available, whatever systems are there, if we are efficiently able to execute that in the right sense of the term, only then we will be able to have a fair system. So it's not about that. There are lots of complaints are there. The check and balances are still there in India. So check and balances are there because the executive judiciary is independent. They're monitoring. Independence is all about it's these are the words of the illusions. So transparency and so until and unless there are political culture is created where people respect the laws, people respect the institutions and abide by it. If you indulge into personal ambitions, ideological ambitions, and regional ambitions, or any other things, you are going to corrupt every or any system of the world. It's not about that any system is foolproof. It's all about that. It's not. People say that let's make the laws. No, let's ensure the certainty of the execution of the laws. The law will certainly be executed. Law will certainly be implemented. The criminals will certainly be punished. Let there be a culture. I am feeling immune from any punishment. I just lose the fear. Let us create a fear of the law. Let people respectability of the law. Let there be a system. We respect that. So it's not about changing the system. It's not about changing your behavioral pattern. It's more important. People will try to change. The changing of the system is not. It's not. I don't go with the idea.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Iftikhar Hussain is saying very informative session, sir. Kausar Tasneem is saying a very, very informative session. Explanation is very good. I have one more question from Mr. Sanjay Gadalia. Before that, I'll try to ask my question. So my second question is, sir, when will we have a law for penalizing politicians for pre-poll false promises?
See that the problem promises. Everybody makes the promises. And when you vote for them, then you treat them as real. And when they got the power, the moment they got the power, you started saying that those promises were false. Again, you will take those promises as real when they will come to the elections again. It's not about that. Who is going to punish? You. That there is constitution has given you democracy, electoral systems where people will be able to punish those who did not perform on their promises. Where is the promises? In the manifestos. You have to audit the performance of the candidate and vote them out. So power lies with the people. Why do you expect a law? Why don't want you to keep that power with you and punish the people? That is my power. The power is with the people to punish the political parties because they did not perform. But when question is, India is still awaiting a kind of system where people are voting rationally, people are voting based on the performance of the candidate, people are voting on as per the rights they enjoy under Article 326. Imagine a situation. Imagine that 900 million voters are there. 900 million voters are there. How many are participating? 37%, 40% have lost hope. They said that they are completely not interested in voting. 40% out of 900 million voters, 40% straight away reject. And who are those people? Can you imagine? Educated people, urban class people, rich people, rational people. They do not go and stand in the queue and wait for their turn to vote. Those 40%. Who are surviving India's democracy? It is the rural people. It is uneducated, semi-literate people. Or fairly that's that, and it's the poor people, those poor and the middle class, lower middle class are surviving India's democracy. 40% who are privileged, educated, rational, and rich, they do not bother about whether, because they have a connection in every government. Whosoever may come to power, they have certain people to get their work done. So they do not believe governments because their work will be done.
Okay, sir. I'll take a question from Pochiram Methari. Pochiram Methari is asking, saying, very informative session, sir. Thanks a lot. Is there any limits in powers to Election Commission to take action against those who are having criminal history on them? Recently, Supreme Court asked.
See that ultimately it is the political parties who have to take the call. Election commissions have agreed to the idea of election watch and ADR, that they see that voters must be informed about their candidates. The law is there that what kind of candidates you are having, how many criminal cases are pending against that person, you are aware of, because that person has to submit affidavit. You know that whether that person is criminal or not. Supreme Court had said. Then again, Supreme Court has come out with one intervention that you have to immediately disqualify a person as a MLA and MP if that person is convicted for 2 years minimum. Second, again, that Supreme Court has come out with another judgment, and despite the petition by the central to review it, Supreme Court says that we are not going to review it. Every political party have to publish the credentials why they have given the candidate to that criminal candidate. Now voters are informed. Voters are informed that what kind of candidates they are going to vote. So the function of the Election Commission is to inform the voters. Let the voters not vote a criminal. The mechanisms are being ensured. The moment say that, why to deny? For example, a criminal cannot vote in an election if that person is in jail. If anybody who is in jail will not be allowed to vote in the elections. So again, there are ways. The point is not about that you want another law. Forget about it. I wrote a piece in the Wire where I said that the Supreme Court should have exercised its power to put a limitation. Anybody having pending criminal cases against a person will not be allowed to contest the elections. But the Supreme Court said that no, it's the power of the Parliament to make the laws. Supreme Court cannot make the law. It can interpret the law. It can create a condition for a new law. So there are many judicial precedents are there which are being treated as law. Judiciary made laws, and that is the parliament is forced to. But making the laws is not enough. Is not enough. Idea is, imagine a situation. American Constitution is not more than 10 to 12 pages. But they are walking the system. We are the lengthiest constitution giving every details. Still we are questioning when we want that. And then 400 plus amendments are there. How many are there? In just 73, in 70 years time, we have amended our constitution 400 times. No, it's not the way. It's all about that. Whatever laws are available, ensure the certainty of its implementations.
Thank you so much for all the question and answers. And yeah, please find a feedback form at the comment box shared by Mr. Ibad. I request those people who are attending to if they want to give the feedback, that would be very helpful. And I thank the audience for joining us today. And I really want to thank Afroz sir for that fantastic lecture, for that fantastic discourse, and mainly, your patience in answering all the questions, and especially passionate questions from our, special, guest, Mr. Sanjay. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much for, speaking to us, sir, on a Sunday. I think this is supposed to be the time to take rest. Yeah.
No, I have to face my wife as well. All right.
So very witty answer. Thank you.
It's wonderful being part with you, and
yeah.
Because you know that you don't believe in monologues.
Yeah.
There should be dialogues. There should be all kind of questions, concerns, comments, and a speaker should not be left without questions. So this is what my idea of a discussions. If there are no question answer formats, I don't join a discussion. This is what my principle is.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for being patient. It's more than 2 hours now. We are really thankful for your generous act. Thank you so much, sir. Have a good night, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.